All right, sorry, you should have got the robot lady like me. Cool, kia ora koutou, welcome you guys. I am going to start with a mihi, which in New Zealand, I'm coming to you from Christchurch today in New Zealand. So before I get started, I wanted to do my own a little attempt at a New Zealand or Māori culture greeting. It's a way to pay tribute to the tribal authorities here and acknowledge the land and say thank you to you guys for coming. I am still learning te reo Māori, so please forgive me if I end up butchering a little bit of the language. Tēnā koutou katoa. E rere taku manu ki te tihi o Aoraki. Rere iho taku manu ma te awa o Rakaia. Tō anu taku manu ki te whenua o Otatahi. Ko nai tahu te mana whenua te iwi whakaruruho. No ahi torera oku tipuna. Ko Jesse, toko ingoa no reira. Ka nui te mihi ki a koutou katoa. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora. All right, so I thought I as well should probably do a little bit of a translation. So basically, greetings everyone and welcome. Thank you for joining us. My bird flies over the summit of Aoraki, which is New Zealand's highest and largest mountain. My bird descends to the Rakaia River, which is the one that runs through the center of the South Island here in New Zealand. My bird lands on the land of Christchurch, which is where I'm coming to you from today. And Ngāi Tahu is the tribal authority or the principal iwi tribe here in Christchurch and most of the South Island. And my ancestors of my family come from Australia. My name is Jessie and welcome to our food waste presentation. So I'm going to be presenting today on behalf of our climate group. Yeah, stoked to have you guys here today. We are recording the webinar, so if you miss any of it, then it will be available on YouTube towards the in the next couple of days or so. I know that with the time difference between Australia and New Zealand there, it is getting a little bit late in New Zealand for the Kiwis. So yeah, if you do have to duck off at any point, know that it will be recorded and available for you later. So if you've got any questions or comments or things you want to add, ideas that you want to throw into the chat to share with the rest of the group as we go along, then absolutely feel free. That is very, very welcome. Because my knowledge is definitely not completely exhaustive of everything there is to know. So the more we can share with each other, the better. And I also wanted to start by saying, I'm not perfect. I'm not a foodiologist or whatever you might want to call it. I'm just someone who's really passionate about food waste and the environment. So if I say something that might not be completely factually correct, then please don't hang me for it. Okay, so coming up tonight, this is what we're going to be covering together. So firstly, I wanted to touch on relationship with food, then move on to why we're wasting so much food. Why is that such a problem? Where in the food supply chain that food waste is occurring, and then hopefully spend largely the rest of the time focusing on the solutions, because that's really the juicy part where we can all get involved. So firstly, our relationship with food. I wanted to first talk about my relationship with food. And as you can see by my chins, I love my food. It's a great way for me to connect with my family and my friends. Usually anytime I'm celebrating something or savoring a moment, it involves food. I love my cooking, so it's a really big creative outlet for me. And as it has been a little bit recently, as I've started to growing my own food as well. And it's always been a great way for me to explore a new culture as well. So my relationship with food is really strong and is something I'm really personally passionate about, which is why it makes me really upset to see some figures like this. So 1 in 4 people around the world are highly or moderately food insecure. So that means that on a regular basis, because of either income or resource constraints, they don't get regular meals, they run out of food, they might go for a day or at worst a couple of days without eating. And this isn't just in countries overseas, this is in our own backyard as well. This is in Australia and New Zealand as well. So on the other hand, we've got 1/3 of the world's food produced for human consumption actually gets lost or wasted. So there's this huge disconnect between these people who are not getting enough food and then other of us who are wasting a lot of food every day. So to give you some idea of how much food is wasted, New Zealand, I'm coming to you next. But yeah, so each year, Australians waste, the food waste that's produced is enough to fill 32 MCGs. So if you've been to the MCG before and you can picture this, this is a stat that makes me feel really quite ill to think about that. So to put it in context, it's like if you were to leave the supermarket with 5 bags of groceries, it's like if you dropped one in the car park on your way to the car or the bus and you didn't bother turning back to pick it up. You just left it behind and it was wasted. And yeah, that equates to just under $4,000 worth of groceries per household per year in Australia. So as Mel pointed out earlier, that's a family trip to Bali. So that's a lot of money that we're all wasting every year. And then in Aotearoa, the food that we are wasting here is equivalent to 271 jumbo jets every year, or enough to feed the population of Dunedin for nearly 3 years. And I think it equates to something like $1.17 billion each year as well. So it's a lot of money going to waste there. So what are the most commonly wasted foods? This is the top 10 list, and it's I think it's exactly the same for, this is the New Zealand list, but I think it's almost exactly the same in Australia. So bread, huge one. You can probably relate to a lot of these things when you're thinking about their own food waste in your household. So in New Zealand, we throw away 29 million loaves of bread a year. Yeah, nearly 1/3 of the food we waste is vegetables, because no one likes to eat a limp celery, do they? And sadly as well, with Kiwis, we love our fish and chips, but it turns out that our scoops of fish and chips are too big, and we throw out 2.7 tons of, 2,700 tons of takeaway chips each year. Chips. So why are we wasting so much food? So there's a couple of reasons, and the way our communities and societies are stacked at the moment makes it a little bit hard for us. We're kind of got a few things up against us here. So the first one is we're time poor. So that probably comes as no surprise to a lot of you. I definitely feel like there's not enough time in every day to get everything done. So it means that we're not being particularly productive with our meal planning. We try to buy in excess just to avoid having to make multiple trips to the shops in a week. And there's always a last minute change of plans, like, hey, you want to just get Uber Eats tonight? I can't be bothered cooking. Yeah, let's do it. So I'm sure you guys can relate to that. We're also really quite disconnected from our food supply chain these days. So I guess back in the day when things used to be a bit more of a luxury, like say a roast chicken, that would be something that you would have for a special occasion or maybe once a month. And now you can duck to the shops and get a whole roast chicken for $12. And I feel like we've lost our appreciation a bit for how much something like that is worth, because we're not growing our own, and we're so globalized these days. We've kind of forgotten what that relationship is like with food a bit, which is just the way things have kind of gone and become slowly over time. I don't think it's anyone's fault. It's just the way it is now. But when you think about it, a roast chicken, it's a whole chicken that's had to be fed and had to be raised, and it's had to be have whatever kind of hormones are injected into it, pay for all of that kind of stuff, the labor to raise it, all of these things, to be able to, for us to be able to go down to the shops and buy it for $12 is just, I don't know, it kind of blows my mind. I'm going to touch on this last one a little bit later here. So we think composting is a get out of jail free card. So don't get me wrong, composting is really a positive thing to do, apart from as opposed to sending things to landfill, but it's not necessarily as golden a solution as we think. So I'm going to touch on that a little bit later. The other things that we're up against is a lot of marketing. So I'm a marketer, so I'm just like disgusted in myself constantly for this stuff. But yeah, marketing has really changed our perception of food. So things like cosmetic standards, I mean, there's these sexy beasts over on the right here, and yet they never make it to our supermarket shelves, these ugly foods. And that's because marketing's told us that a carrot should look a particular way, or a parsnip should look a particular way. And yes, that is a sexy looking turnip. He's very seductive, he or she. So yeah, there's that up against us, which is not necessarily, causing food waste on our end, but for supermarkets, that's definitely a big deal. Confusion over date labels between best before and used by, or all the other different combinations of that. I think there's a big misunderstanding of that. And I'll go into that a little bit more detail in a few more slides. Another marketing device that's come into play over the last 40 or 50 years is everything is getting bigger. Our trolleys are getting bigger, our plates are getting bigger, and our fridges are getting bigger. So I think since the 1970s, our shopping carts have doubled in size. And this is a marketing device that's been used by the supermarkets to make us want to fill that empty space. Same with plates, and same with fridges, that the fridge is getting bigger, and there's something in our makeup that doesn't like us to see white space in our fridges. So it's another device to make us buy more, which is then leading to more waste. And the lingering perception of waste as a symbol of wealth. This was something that really like blew my mind when it kind of fell into place in the last few weeks when I was preparing for this, was that we have this lingering perception from, the days of ye old banquet, where they've got this like gross amount of food around, and that's a symbol of represented wealth. And that's kind of lingered these days into the way we find society functioning now. So running out of food seems to be this faux pas. Like if you hold an event and you run out of food, you kind of get embarrassed, right? Whereas it should be the opposite way around. Like if you're wasting food, if you've got this massive surplus, shouldn't we be embarrassed by that, the fact that we're being wasteful? And same with doggy bags. Like if you've ever gone to a restaurant or gone out for dinner with friends, and maybe you've over ordered, or the portions are bigger than you expected, but you've been a bit shy or embarrassed to ask for a doggy bag to take it away. These are these kind of things that are ingrained in society that have come from this historic with waste being a symbol of wealth. So it's just interesting to be conscious of the psychology between all of these things. All right, so why is this waste, all of this food waste, such a problem? So I think usually when we think about the things that are hurting our planet, we think of like big smokestacks or cars billowing out, dark smoke, deforestation, turtles with straws stuck up their nose. Whereas actually the emissions caused from food waste are absolutely massive. So globally, 8% of greenhouse gas emissions are made up from food waste. So if that was a country, it would be third largest in terms of emissions after China and the US. So it's huge. And I think one of the things that people don't, or one of the things I wanted to touch on is like how these greenhouse gases are created. So one of the reasons is for this creation of greenhouse gas emissions from food waste is the way that the food waste decomposes. So if it decomposes in landfill, it creates a combination of methane and CO2. Whereas if it degrades in compost, it mainly produces CO2. And that's because one environment has oxygen and the other one doesn't. But methane is 25 times more potent than CO2. So even though composting is great and it does retain some of the energy from the initial process, it does still result in CO2 emissions. So that's something to keep in mind. So that's where some of the emissions have come from. But the other huge consideration is all the parts that have emissions of the food supply chain that we actually don't see. So when we fail to eat a piece of food, we fail in an entire system and all of the energy and resources that have been put into growing that piece of food. So the best way I found online to describe this is of food waste being an iceberg. So we only see part of a food's life. So we might have what's a good example? Okay, so we might have a banana that you bought for 80 cents, like that for one banana. And you let that banana get a little bit brown, get a little bit squidgy. It's got some black dots on it now. And you decide you don't want to eat that banana anymore, which is fair enough. It's not looking particularly appealing. We'll get to ways that you could use the banana down the track. But so you end up throwing out this banana, and to you, it's just one banana going in the compost, and it was 80 cents. So what's the big deal? But there are less obvious consequences of throwing that out. So when you think about that banana, the seed had to be planted somewhere. Most of the bananas here in New Zealand, I'm not sure about Australia, but in New Zealand, most of our bananas come from Ecuador. So in Ecuador, someone's had to plant the banana crop. They've had to water it, fertilize it to make it grow. There's had to be labor involved with growing the crop. They've had to pay someone to harvest the banana plant. They've had to refrigerate it. They've had to store it. They've had to transport it all the way to New Zealand for it to get off a ship here, for it to be freighted to the supermarket, for someone at the supermarket to take it off the trucking shelf, for it to then be put on the supermarket shelf for you to buy it, to bring it home, to decide that you don't want it anymore after it rots. So yeah, pretty much there's this huge underlying impact of throwing out food that none of us really think about. And it's only something I've been aware of in the last 6 months or 12 months or so. So yeah, as grim as it is, we end up kind of trashing our land to produce more food than there are mouths to eat it. And yet a huge amount of the world population are going hungry. So we've got some big problems on our hands. And the girls in the climate group, we had a bit of a laugh about this earlier last week. We were saying that these pears are some of the most well-traveled pears that we've ever seen. So they've seen more of the world than we have. So these are pears that were grown in Argentina, shipped to Thailand to be packed, and then shipped back to the US to be sold. So just how bonkers that is. We just thought it was a little bit funny how well traveled those pears are, seen more continents than us. So I just want to touch on this briefly before going on to talk about solutions. So where is food waste occurring? So this is roughly what a simplified food supply chain looks like. So I don't like to use the term developing world and things like that, but for the sake of simplifying things, let's go with that. So this food supply chain where the waste occurs in a developing world, in countries like Africa, that you'll find that most of the waste occurs towards the start of this food supply chain, and it's maybe because they don't have a sophisticated ways to store food. They might have more problems with pests. They might be more susceptible to severe weather events that are going to spoil crops. Whereas in countries like Australia and New Zealand, we actually find that the food waste is more likely to occur towards the end of this food supply chain. So, and as the world's become more globalized, it means that this food supply chain has actually really lengthened over time, which has created more opportunities for food loss to occur, because it's longer from the time that the crop or whatever it is grown to the amount of steps it has to go through packing and production and freight to actually get to the consumer. And the further down the supply chain you get, actually, the more resources have then gone into producing that piece of food as well. So this is where we have the biggest opportunity to reduce our impact as consumers as well. So yeah, by the time things get down the food supply chain to us, it actually ends up that 25 to 30% of household emissions are made up by food waste. So this is not great, but it's also a massive opportunity, because by tackling food waste, we can make a really big impact on reducing our own household emissions. So now we're going to get onto some solutions, because like, here's the thing, nobody likes wasting food. Like, no one goes to the supermarket and buys food with the intention of throwing it in the bin in 1 week's time. It's just something that we haven't been paying a whole lot of attention to. So we've got a whole bunch of solutions here for you. And as I go through these solutions, if you have stuff to add, like in addition to these solutions, feel free to pop them in the chat for everybody else to be able to see and be able to share, because yeah, it's definitely not an exhaustive list. And we might, after this, depending on what ideas come through, we might be able to put together some more material to be able to share back with you guys about, yeah, just with a culmination of everybody's ideas together. We might as well knowledge share and yeah, broaden the list of ideas of what we could all be doing in terms of action. So yeah, the solutions, what it ultimately comes down to is just buying what you need and then eating what you buy. But there are, at each stage of, I guess, your interaction with food, there are different things that we can be doing to make sure we give ourselves the best chance of not spoiling any food. So the first one of those starts with planning. So planning wisely. Yeah, as an adult, just meal planning and choosing what to eat every night is just bloody exhausting, but it's got to be done. So the first thing to do is, or that I'm trying to do at the moment, is do almost like a stock take on what I already have. So making sure I actually go through the fridge to see what's there, looking in the freezer to see what needs to be used up, going through the pantry. Sometimes I thought I needed to go to the shops, but after I look through everything, I'm like, oh, actually I can make this mishmash of a dinner out of all these things that were already knocking about in the fridge. So yeah, before going to buy anything more, just have a look at what you already have. Then create a meal plan. It doesn't have to be like a fully structured up kind of nice meal plan. You can just do a bit of jotting down and then write your list from there. You know, if you're buying a whole cabbage for one, or you need some cabbage for something and there's no way to buy anything smaller than a half head of cabbage, then think about other ways that you can use cabbage in other meals in the days to come. And another big thing that's been massive for me is factoring more time into my supermarket shop, which, I mean, usually historically I've just wanted to get in and out as fast as humanly possible. But I'm trying to slow down and take my time choosing and buying food these days. Reason being that the choices that we're making when we're purchasing stuff at the supermarket directly influence then what the supermarket orders from farmers, and then also directly influences what a farmer has to throw away as well. So we do need to take a bit more responsibility there, knowing that our choices have such a big impact on things. And then if you do have to go to the supermarket without a bit of a plan, so you haven't had time, some tips that I try to never go hungry, because that's where I tend to be like, oh yeah, I'll get one of those and get one of those. And I tend to overbuy pretty horrendously when I shop hungry, because I'm a hangry savage at times. And then also, if I end up finding myself at the supermarket without a plan, I try to choose to just walk around with a basket rather than a trolley, because that shit's heavy when you start to put more food in there. And if I'm having to carry around everything and my arm's getting sore, I'm more likely to wrap up my shop faster and not buy stuff that I don't need. So yeah, that's a few if you can't make a plan. Oh yeah, someone's just put in the chat. Thanks, Sal. She says that she uses a digital list for dinner ideas and puts it in an app. So I guess that means that you don't accidentally leave the house with the grocery list at home, that it's always going to be with you, because presumably we always have our phones on us as well. Understanding expiry dates is a really important thing, which I've only just got clarity on in the last little while. So use by dates serve a really important function because they are applied to, so this slide references New Zealand, but it's actually for Australia as well. The same kind of rules apply. So you'll mainly find use by dates on meat products, some dairy products, instant formula for babies, and seafood. And these dates serve a really important purpose because they tell us, they give us a date range, but they're important because even though these types of foods might look okay and they might smell okay, they can have harmful bacteria that you might not see or might not be able to detect with your own senses. So those use by dates serve a really important function for indicating to us what's good or not. So follow those closely. But best before dates, on another hand, or sometimes referred to as sell by dates or display dates, they're actually a marketing ploy designed to make people throw out food prematurely and buy more. So if you look at something, I don't know, like a bag of spinach or say your milk. Your milk's a good example. I'm pretty sure they're just best before dates on the milk. I might have made that up. Maybe that's not a good example of milk. But some products, a packet of pasta, they might have a best before date. It's really referring to when the quality will be best before. Whereas realistically, pasta, rice, all of that kind of stuff is never really going to go off. Things of Vegemite or peanut butter, open it up, give it a sniff. If it smells all right, give it a taste. Most of the time it's fine. You'll know straight away whether it's not right or not. But don't rely necessarily on those best before or sell or display dates because they are a marketing ploy. They just want you to buy more food and to throw it out thinking it's not good and buy more after that. Don't be fooled by them. All right, so next one is shop wisely. So some of the things to look out for is when you're at the supermarket, avoid the temptation to buy in bulk. It does make it feel like it's going to be cheaper for you. Say there's like a 3 for 2 deal with broccoli, heads of broccoli. You can, if you're going to use 3 heads of broccoli, great, go ahead, get the 3 for 2 deal. But realistically, I'd say for most people, you're going to end up buying 3 broccoli. You're going to eat one, maybe half eat another, and essentially the third one's going to go to waste. So just think critically before getting sucked into these multi deals, because again, it's another marketing tactic to get you to buy more. Choose the ugly produce. Look at those cute, ugly little guys. There's nothing wrong with them. They taste exactly the same. They're just a little bit weird looking. Choose the ugly produce where you can, because if you don't choose it and no one else chooses it, they're the ones that are most likely to go to waste and to be thrown out by the supermarket at the end of the day. Similarly, sometimes I've started, if it doesn't really matter, like say I'm shopping for tomatoes and I know that I'm making a pasta sauce out of tomatoes, I will purposefully choose the damaged produce. Sometimes, like if there's a onion that's been a bit beaten around and it's maybe got a big dent in the side, or a tomato that's got its skin's been pierced a little, or a carrot that's been snapped in half by being transported, I will often choose those types of produce because they taste the same. And depending on how I'm using them, it really could not matter in the slightest that they have a little blemish on them. But I know that if I don't use them and no one else uses them, that they're likely just to be chucked out by the supermarket at the end of the day because they don't look perfect. So that's one option. I often also choose products close to their expiry date if I know I'm going to be using them that night, because or that night or the next couple of days. Again, because I know that if they're still on the shelf when that expiry date rocks around, the supermarket is going to throw them out. So that's a little way that you can reduce food waste during your shop. But of course, only get them if you know you're going to be using them within that expiry date. Another reason why you need a bit more time for your shop is that it would be great if you could choose local produce rather than international produce, because obviously the further it's traveled, the more resources have gone into getting it there. So initially thinking about your entire food shop and going, oh shit, I have to reassess whether they came from Ecuador or whether they came from New Zealand or they came from Queensland or wherever they come from. That's quite a time consuming process to do those reassessments, and I wouldn't recommend doing it all in one go. that is a hard task. So what I've kind of done is work through this process really gradually, and maybe every time I go to the supermarket, I'll reassess, or do I get these oats or those oats or those oats, and make the decision there. And then I've been then once you've done that thought process, you know every time that that's the particular brand of oats that you want to be going for because they've got the least travel footprint. And so just do that like one product at a time. Maybe choose to do that one product per shop and just decide what decisions you're going to make that are different. Alrighty, and storing food wisely is a massive one. So again, this isn't an exhaustive list. This is just a few that have kind of come to mind and roughly based off that list of the top 10 things that are most commonly wasted as well. So great one that Sal contributed last week was to check the temperature of your fridge or freezer. That's like a #1 thing to do. So I'm not going to advise what the best temperatures are. I think Google will be probably best set to let you know how it's best set, but you definitely don't want it at the point where, you know, if you chuck your lettuce in the fridge that it's going to be half freezing, because nobody likes a half frozen lettuce after that defrost. It gets all really limpy. But yeah, that's a great one to check straight off the bat. Something with veggies like carrots, I've found with cucumbers and a few other ones, if you store them in an airtight container, they won't last so much longer. Like, you know how a carrot will just get like really shrivelly and limpy and sad after a week or so in the produce tray down the bottom. I think it was last year I started storing my veggies for a while there. I've kind of dropped the ball lately, but I was storing them in airtight containers, like a big Tupperware container, and my carrots stayed like perfect for 5 weeks, just no blemishes on them at all. So yeah, that's a good one to do. Another one I didn't realize was potatoes and onions shouldn't ever be kept together. I don't know about you guys, but my stuff usually gets chucked in this little bowl with all the potatoes and onions and everything together. But I think I can't remember which way around it is, but I think it's the onions produce a particular type of gas that makes potatoes ripen a lot faster than they need to. So keep those guys separately. Skipping ahead, same with bananas. So store them away from other fruits because they produce, I think it's ethylene, one of those gases that makes other fruits ripen really fast. So to keep your other fruits from going nasty real fast, keep those guys separate. And same, the bananas and tomatoes should actually be stored out of the fridge. I only learned this the other day. I've been storing my tomatoes in the fridge forever, and turns out you can just probably chuck them in the fruit bowl with all the other fruits. And yeah, bananas as well. They're going to spoil faster if you pop them in the fridge as well. So keep those guys out. Leafy greens, they actually last so much longer, like a celery. When I'm talking about leafy greens, sorry, I'm talking like a celery, or if you get a bunch of coriander, things like that. If you pop them in a little glass of water with their roots facing down into the water, just a little bit, they will last so long. And same with lettuce. If you store lettuce in some kind of damp towel and in an airtight container, it will last for weeks. Whereas a head of lettuce usually can go bad in a matter of days. And breads, given our climate in New Zealand and Australia is quite humid, breads should be frozen. So straight away, when you get a whole loaf of bread, what I've been doing previously is slicing it up into the slices I want, popping it in either a reusable Ziploc bag or into a paper bag and popping it in the freezer, and then I just get out what I need at the time. And same with your nuts. Freeze your nuts because they go rancid really quickly at room temperature, even if you have them in a sealed bag or container. But yeah, they're just a few examples of kind of the most common produce items. And I would recommend, it sounds a bit lame, but I would get online and actually Google like the best way to store this and the best way to store that, because I learned a lot that way. And I was like, oh my God, I've gone like 10 years of my life storing blah, blah, blah the wrong way. And I just wouldn't want to get even further down the track in my life to learn that I've been storing other things incorrectly my entire life. So worth the 10-minute Google. All right, consuming wisely. So this is one that I've become really passionate about lately because it's an awesome way to get more inventive. So one of the things that I've been trying to do is not just eat it, complete it. So when it comes to using up produce, usually I would, peel my carrots and peel my potatoes and maybe even peel beetroot. I never used to eat the broccoli stalk, things like that, that now I'm trying to use up the whole thing. So I don't peel my carrots anymore, don't peel those potatoes if they're going into certain things. Beetroots never get peeled anymore. All of that stuff I want to eat. It's actually some of the most nutrient rich parts of the food is the peel. So there's no reason why we can't cook with those on. What else have I been doing? Oh yeah, also I think in New Zealand we pay per head for broccoli, but I think in Australia you pay by weight. So it's just bizarre that we'd pay for a whole broccoli when the florets are 2/3 of the weight, and then we'll throw out like 1/3 of the weight, or essentially 1/3 of the money that we've just paid for that, when the stalk of the broccoli is actually pretty tasty. I usually dice it up and fry it off with some onions and stuff before adding it to stir fries, which I've found is usually a pretty good way to go about that. I've even got to, you can see in the bottom right hand corner there, that photo is of potato peels that I peeled off before making some mashed potato. So you could just keep the peels in there to make your mashed potato, but I prefer my mashed potato a bit creamier. So we'd peeled off the potato skins, and then what I've been doing is tossing them in a bowl with a bit of olive oil, like dried rosemary and salt, and then laying them out on a baking tray and giving them a bake, and they make these wicked crunchy little chippies that you can have. And they're quite good to like sprinkle on top of things during a meal as well, to just add a bit of that crunch factor, as MasterChef likes to say. Other things that I've been trying to like complete eat are things like olive brine. I know that sounds a bit yuck to some people who hate olives, but instead of throwing out all that awesome salty brine, I've been adding it to pasta stocks and things like that. It adds some really nice flavor there. And then that mousse in the photo is actually made from aquafaba, which is what you get from, it's like the brine from certain beans. So beans and peas. So I made that mousse with the brine from a tin of chickpeas. So I was using the chickpeas themselves to make my own hummus, and I drained off the brine, and it essentially ends up like the consistency of when you whip egg whites. So that's a good one to hold up, a good way to use up that as well. Other things that I thought of on the list is if when you get to the bottom of like a peanut butter jar, you can use that to make nice stir fry sauces. Just tip all the ingredients in and give it a big shake to kind of loosen up all those bits that are left in the peanut butter jar. And same with Vegemite. I think I learned this one from my mom, shout out to Judy, is that if you can put some water in with the Vegemite jar and give it a shake, it can make some really nice beef stock to put into your food as well. All right, so the second one on this list is practicing FIFO, so first in and first out. And a great way to do this is to create like an eat me first tub or shelf in the fridge or the cupboard, so that you know what's going to be going off soonest. That's a word. And yeah, so that brings me to the final point. You know that things like spinach, when you buy them, have a really short life in your fridge, and just knowing, maybe put them on the eat me first shelf or in that tub to make sure that they don't just turn into a soupy mess in that little bag. All right, cruising through. Managing surplus, this is one I'm also pretty passionate about, is like really make the most of your freezer, but avoid UFOs, which are unidentified freezer objects. So make sure whenever you're putting anything in the freezer, you label it appropriately. Another one I've learned is freezing stuff in smaller portions is a lot more helpful as well. Like if you chuck like a whole leftover spaghetti bolognese in the fridge, and then when you get it out, you actually don't need those 3 portions, you just want one instead of having to chisel. If you froze it in smaller portions in the first place, then that makes it a lot easier for future Jessie to find food. Ice cube trays have been great for doing this. So You can put anything in an ice cube tray. The example here is with leftover stock, but I've also used the ice cube tray to freeze excess pesto, coconut milk, what else I've done? Tomato paste, all sorts of wine. If you get stale red wine and you want to save that, if you pop it into little ice cube trays and freeze it and then snap them into a Ziploc bag, then you can just add like a little bit of this and a little bit of that to your meals as you're going. If you have surplus as well, I'm a big fan of sharing stuff around, whether it's just creating like a free box out the front of your house, taking it to work to share things with your colleagues. Better to share things like, you know, if your lemon tree is going absolutely nuts, then take your stuff to work and share it around. It's a really nice thing to do. It just feels good. Or even better as well is there's lots of people who are food insecure around our cities as well. So don't be afraid to drop stuff in a community pantry, donate it to a food bank, or even just walk up to somebody on the street who might not be getting steady meals and just ask them if they're hungry, if they want something. It's quite a nice thing to do. I've started doing that a little bit with leaving restaurants and stuff. If there's leftover food that nobody's going to eat that's in good nick, I'll bag it up and then drive it and take it to drop to somebody who's looking hungry, living on the street. All right, we're coming to the end. Repurposing food that's past its prime. This is one I really pride myself on. I'm really good at making mystery pasta sauces and mystery soups. So if there's squishy fruits, smoothies, stewed fruits, like stewed apples, if you've got squishy apples that don't have that crunch anymore, or turning stuff into muffins or baked goods is a great one to use up the squishy stuff. Yeah, produce that's gone a bit squishy, like any squishy tomatoes, I'll usually dice them up and chuck them in something. Droopy carrots, you can usually grate or chop up and chuck into those sauces as well. Also great for making frittatas. Any leftover roast veggies, for example, I'll usually beat some eggs and chuck some feta or something in there and turn those into frittatas. I think someone mentioned this in the chat already, but if you've got stale bread, I haven't actually tried this myself, but apparently if you put it in the microwave for a little bit, it destales. It goes back to a nice texture again, which is cool. But the other ones I've done is I've just made croutons because everybody loves a crouton. Or sad veggies as well also go really well in soups. Sorry, you can tell I'm getting tired. It's late in Christchurch. I haven't done this one either, but apparently if you microwave sugar that's gone like really rock hard, or honey that's crystallized, it comes back as well. So maybe one to give a crack. And one that my mum is really great at is turning plain rice into fried rice. So yeah, anytime I have something that's a little bit dead, I always like search what to do with leftover tomatoes or what to do with this. And there's usually 1,000,001 ideas on the internet to help with that kind of thing. All right, don't be a tosser, guys. We went over earlier that sending stuff to landfill is really not ideal because it does produce that extra methane, which is super potent for the atmosphere. So where you can, please, please, please send things to the organics bin. I think, I forget what it's called in Australia. It's like a FOMO or FOGO, where you can actually send all of your kitchen waste to the appropriate bin. Even better if you can do your own home composting, because that means that the organics truck doesn't have to then ship everything or, you know, send everything by road to a external plant. It's going to cut down on petrol costs to be able to transport that. One thing, like sending stuff to compost can be a bit ew sometimes. What we have at home is a little bucket that I keep on the kitchen bench that I chuck any food waste into. You can also chuck napkins and things like that in Christchurch, definitely into those. Anything that's, yeah, doesn't have any, I guess, synthetic stuff attached to it. But one thing I've been doing at home to make this a little bit of a yuck process to cleaning this bucket is lining it with a little bit of old paper bag. So if we get something like Uber Eats delivered in a paper bag, I've been cutting it up into really small little squares to line the bottom of our compost bucket before stuff gets taken out to organic bin, and I've found that that makes it a lot less to clean in between everything. And something that I'll get the girls to talk to this a little bit later when we've wrapped up, but the one thing that we've been doing as a climate group as well is been doing a little bit of a food waste audit. It's really interesting to document the kind of things that you end up throwing away. There's definitely a lot of guilt attached, so it's not a sunshine and rainbows activity. But what I've found personally, and the girls will speak to this later as well, is that it actually reveals quite a lot about your behavior when it comes to food waste. So I've just been keeping like a little list next to our compost bin of like eggshells, loose tea leaves, banana peels, all sorts of stuff, you know, leftover such and such, or I don't know, moldy black beans, which I threw out today, sadly. But yeah, there's some stuff in there that it reveals that's quite interesting. And I've been going through a bit of a rethink about how I can minimize the amount of stuff that goes to compost as well. Because compost is good, but less compost is even better. So there's ways that you can repurpose stuff that would typically go to the compost. So things like coffee grounds, usually we would pop those in our compost bin, but shout out to Kurt. Thanks, Kurt. He's been sucked into this with me, and he's been collecting all of the coffee grounds from his morning coffee in a little Tupperware container that I then take out to the garden and use as fertilizer. And it's a really nitrogen rich byproduct, I guess, of making coffee that I've been using to feed my plants. Same with my loose leaf tea leaves. I've been popping that on the plants as well to help give more nutrients to my plants. Banana peels are a great one that you can keep around if you soak them in water for a little bit. They're really potassium rich, and that aids the plants with moving water and nutrients between the cells and keeping them healthy. Yeah, and my sister's just put in the chat as well that you can actually make a mean body scrub from old coffee grounds as well. I think there's a whole lot of stuff. You can make natural dyes. There's all sorts of ways that you can use it. Another one is eggshells as well. That's something that we seem to go through a lot in our household. So they're actually really rich in calcium and minerals, and they can really be good for your garden as well. So maybe something to have a look at. But yeah, this stuff I wouldn't have realized I was throwing out so much of until I did this waste audit. So something for you guys to think about. All right. So they're the main solutions, but essentially it comes down to, like I said, buying what you need and then eating what you buy. So if you can do even part of those things, that's epic. None of us are perfect, but if you can just, chip away at one little thing at a time, it all culminates in some big differences. But if you do feel like you're getting on top of a bunch of this stuff, then there are some neck level food waste avoidance tips. So shortening your food supply chain is a really great one to lower your emissions and I guess the byproducts associated with food, getting food into your home. So shopping local is a great one to do that, but also reducing your food chain by growing some of your own food as well. So this is a little bok choy that I regrew from its little stumpy rooty bit, like the little, I call them knobs, but I think that's probably a better word. So from the little stumpy bit of the bok choy that I'd cut off for the leafy greens for and used in the stir fry, I just kept this little knobby thing and in a tiny bit of water on the kitchen windowsill and changed its water every couple of days. And then it started to grow. And then I just kept changing the water and it just sat there. I didn't do anything except give it water, and it grew and it grew and it grew. And then eventually I planted it, and now it's absolutely booming. And I can't believe that I've got these three full new bok choys out in the garden now from these little knobs that I otherwise would have sent to the organics bin. So that was a cool experiment. And yeah, Kamo's right in the chat. You can do this with all sorts of other plants as well. So you can do it with all types of other lettuce or spring onions, as she's pointed out. But yeah, it's a fun little experiment as well. I actually get such a buzz of watching these things grow on my windowsill. It's become a bit of a jungle as I regrow and cultivate a whole lot of stuff on that windowsill. So what else? There's a few other things outside of your own household that you can be doing as well to work on this huge food waste problem that we have, because Yeah, the household waste is part of the problem, but there's all sorts of problems with the rest of the food supply chain as well, which is, I mean, largely out of our control, but we do have the opportunity to put pressure on our suppliers. So get curious and ask for better. So ask your local supermarket or your bakery, your butcher, your restaurant, or the caterer for your event what they do when with the produce that they don't sell. It comes up with some really interesting answers. I did that for my local New World not too long ago, and the store manager actually called me and gave me some really good information about what they do with their food waste. And I was happy to see that they actually are part of some food recovery programs with donating the food to food banks and that kind of thing. On that, something that there's a big misconception about as well is around, well, a lot of supermarkets I've kind of found around the traps use an excuse of, oh, we can't donate the food to a food bank because if someone gets sick, we could be sued. That's total bullshit. I think people are still saying that because they actually don't understand the laws. But Nerdy McGee over here has actually looked up the Food Act in New Zealand and Australia, and there are laws in place that actually provide immunity for food donors from any liability, as long as the food is donated for a charitable purpose and where the food was safe to consume at the time of donation. So it's actually, that's no excuse from people really, from supermarkets and other producers or suppliers, sorry. Number 2, let's break the unwritten rules of society. I think, you know, not asking for a doggy bag or over catering an event. These are legacy things from history that I think we can really break. Let's maybe try and change it around and break this taboo and actually make it socially unacceptable to waste food, not the other way around. Yeah, so don't be shy to ask for a doggy bag. I think that's something we could all do a bit better job of. Continue to read and learn. I'm happy to share some additional resources after this. There's some awesome webinars, documentaries on Netflix about food waste as well. I've got a whole list of them of ones that I've had some real success from and learned a lot from. I'd be happy to share. And lastly, talk about the food waste problem. We have this wicked potential for sharing knowledge. So if I tell 3 people and those 3 people tell 3 people each, all of a sudden within a few steps, we've got a lot of knowledge that's been shared. So yeah, tell as many people as you can. I mean, as soon as I get started talking about food waste, it's just such a can of worms comes to this stuff. So yeah, talk about it as much as you can. And very lastly, just remember that when you're going through this, like it's an awesome thing to undertake. And like I said, one of the easiest ways that you can reduce your household emissions is by tackling your food waste. But keep in mind that you can't do everything perfectly and really shouldn't beat yourself up if you do have to throw out stuff from time to time. It's all part of this work in progress and just part of incremental change. If you like any diet in my world, if I try and go hard at something too fast, I know it's going to be unsustainable. So just chip away at it, and any progress you make is better than doing nothing perfectly. Cool. That's a lot of talking from me, you guys, but I am done. And yeah, happy to email resources and a recording of this around to you guys afterwards. But I was wondering if anybody has any questions.
Well done, Jessie.
Thanks. I was nervous.
You crushed it.
Thanks, girl. I haven't really been following the chat. I don't know if you Climates want to jump in and share anything else, or if there's any insights from your own food waste audits about your own behavior that you want to have a chat about.
Totally. I think there's a lot of great food waste hacks going on in the chat, so we'll definitely summarize them and share them on our socials so you can screenshot them and use them in your lives. I think from the food audit that we did, it was just a really good thing to do, to be like, we think we're like awesome eco people, and we were like, oh my God, we're wasting so much stuff. So it's just a really good thing to do to then sort of motivate yourself to do better. One thing that really stood out to me was tea bags. I have like this giant box of tea bags. I should just be using loose leaf. And then, as Jessie said, putting that on the garden. And also another thing, in lockdown have been making muffins and cupcakes, but I've got like this huge pile of like paper patty pans that I don't even know where they've come from. But I have been using them, and obviously that then is waste as well. So we are transitioning to just not use them. You can obviously just like oil up the tray or get those silicone ones. So that was just another hack for me. And the third point from us was just the veggie waste. We, as vegos, only eat vegetables, yet still have, as Jessie would say, the limp celery situation. So the focus for us is storing that better. And also if there is waste, either using it for pasta sauce, for soup, or even turning it into stock, you can cut up all of your veggies, and then boil it with some herbs and spices for ages, strain it, put it in the freezer, and that is veggie stock, and that is free stock. You're pretty much making money. And then the boiled veggies can go in the compost as well. But yes, I don't know, Mel, if you have anything else to add. I'm throwing you under the bus.
Thanks, Sal. I was going to say the stock thing, so now.
Oh, soz.
Yeah, I think with just the food audit, it was really interesting. I don't know if you guys can see this, but we had this kind of stuck on our fridge, and we split it up into avoidable food waste and unavoidable, and that was really helpful as well, because I really didn't want the avoidable to get longer than the unavoidable, so it made me be creative with what I had in the fridge. So things like, mushy strawberries, I should have just eaten the strawberries before they got mushy. Like pumpkin seeds and skin and stuff. It's like I could have used the pumpkin seeds because I eat pumpkin seeds a lot, but I buy them. It's like I use pumpkin all the time. I could have just dried the seeds myself and not have to pay for pumpkin seeds from the shop. And I also think too, my partner, bless him, like he tries, but he's not as kind of into this as I am. And I think having this list has been a nice way of gently shaming him into thinking more about these things, because he threw out an entire lettuce that was like, I hate iceberg lettuce, but he bought it. So, and then he had to throw it out because it got mushy. And I was like, put it on the bloody list. And so he had to like write it on there. And he's been really like, he's brought up the lettuce a few times now, like being like properly shamed about it. So if you've got a reluctant partner or housemate or whoever, I think it's a really good exercise to do, to just get them kind of thinking about it.
Yeah, because I think when we talk about like throwing something away, it just goes away and we don't, like, it's gone then, and it's kind of somebody else's problem. But yeah, we have to remember that there's no away, and these audits or these lists that you keep about the stuff that you're throwing away is like just right in your face of like, oh man, holy crap. It's like a lingering reminder of the things that you had to throw away.
Yeah, I think another thing that I've started doing as well is just as soon as I get all my vegetables on a Sunday, I'll cut them all up straight away and put them into heaps of containers. I send a photo to Demi every Sunday. It's the highlight of her week. But yeah, I literally just like prepare, even if it's just like one capsicum, I chop it up and put it in a container because I'm more likely to use it and it's less likely to go a bit sulky. So that's another fun activity you can do on a Sunday as well.
That's the thing. It does take a lot of time. I think given we're all, life's just full on. It's just not slowing down at all. And it does take a bit of dedicated time to do these things. Mel, yeah, you could have dried your pumpkin seeds, but most of the time ain't nobody got time for that. So it's, you got to make these trade-offs from time to time as well, and go easy on yourselves.
I work for myself though, so I could, but thank you, Jessie.
You're not off the hook. Yeah. I'll ring my shame bell.
Awesome.
I know that Jessie's talking about not creating the waste to start with, but one of the things that I've been using, which has been really useful, is that people perhaps who don't have a lot of space, I know composting isn't the ideal situation, as you've said, but for people that don't have a lot of space, what I've been introduced to is small buckets with lids. You cut the bottom off, you stick them in whatever bit of dirt you've got, and you use that as your mini compost. And it breaks down within 2 or 3 weeks. And so if you're interested in then planting some veggies or herbs into that space, you just pull the bucket out, go and stick it in the ground somewhere else, and you've got a beautifully rich little bit of soil to plant stuff into. So even though you're still creating your carbon dioxide, I still think it's a great way, rather than putting it in the FOGO bin that we have here in, well, it's certainly in our area in Camberwell. So go to your local cafe and ask them if they've got those buckets that they get their oil or whatever in, their fats and stuff in. Doesn't have to be very big, like a small bucket with a lid that can close, or something you can put a brick on top. And it's actually a really perfect way of creating just a little tiny mini compost bin that will break down really quickly, and you'll get to see the results really quickly.
Love that.
Yeah, because I think as well, that's an awesome solution to, and like next level to putting stuff in the organics bin or the FOGO bin as well, because yeah, once we throw that away, someone's then got it, like the truck's still got to service your area to pick up that waste, and any extra 100 grams, 200 grams of organic waste that's going in that is just going to further contribute to how much petrol is involved to then transport that back to the composting facility as well. So it's definitely a great way, like a good initiative. Cool. Sweet, you guys. Well, yeah, there's heaps more material online about this kind of stuff, and I'm looking forward to reading back through the chat to see what else has been kind of thrown out there, and we might see as a climate group as well how we might be able to condense down some of these ideas almost into like a cheat sheet style thing that we can send out as our ongoing reminder about the things that we've kind of covered off today. Cool, but thank you for joining us, you guys. That was good. I was really nervous.
Thank you. Well done, Jessie. Thank you for everyone.
Thanks, guys. Right, I hope you have learned a lot, and yeah, have a great evening.
See you at the next one.
Yay.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.